Hello, welcome to Darkest Hour Leveling Tips. My name is Theo, and here is tip number 5, creating BSP. BSP is basically an exact science. You want to be as perfect as possible with BSP, unlike terrain and a lot of static mesh placement. So you want to know basically a lot about your grid, how to snap to grid, and like make sure things are aligned. There's another rule with BSP to always make it convex, not concave. That means no kind of in regards to one brush. To never have any holes in it or anything like that. And I'm going to show you some shapes and stuff that is not a good shape. But the first thing you need to know about creating BSP is the builder brush and locating the builder brush and everything to that extent. So here's the builder brush right here. It's a red box. Sometimes the builder brush can be hard to locate. One method is to, is that a method? No, that's not. Let's see here. Yeah, so what I do is I zoom really far out, I turn off everything that you can, statics and stuff like that, and then I just hit B, and you'll see a little thing. You can also click this, and that will make a new one. But B toggles on and off the builder brush. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag my builder brush to close to the center of the map here. And then I'm going to align view to actor. And you can see it's just under the terrain here. I'm going to raise it up. And so some shapes that would be bad. Okay, so when you create BSP, you're allowed to edit it and manipulate each vertex. And I always try to keep the vertices vertically aligned. When you get into situations where you're finding yourself having the vertical vertices of a box or whatever misaligned, it can get really complicated and dangerous and, well, just annoying to work on. But for this case, I'm just going to show you some basic shapes. So the first thing you can do is zoom in on a single vertex like this, and I use Control Alt, I hold those, and then I left click, drag, and select. Alright, so what that did was selected both the top vertex and the bottom vertex. So when you do this band select method, you actually select all the vertices in the selection. So there I selected 4 vertices. We could turn on this if you prefer, and so you can see that I have all 4 of those vertices. So now I could manipulate it and make it into what is it, a trapezoid? I don't even know. And you can play around with it, and let's say I want to line it back up. I use the other viewports, and you can see the misalignment here. You just line them back up, and bam, it's now a rectangle again. And so some shapes that you don't want to do. So this would be fine. This is a box. All right, this would be fine. That is a bizarre diamond-looking thing. All right, this would not be good. Do not do that. See how there's a carve out of it? To make a shape like this, you need another brush that carves out of a box brush. You definitely don't want to move things around in the 3D viewport either, because it's very easy to get them all off. As you can see here, I've actually raised them when I shouldn't have, and that's bad. You don't want to manipulate in the 3D viewport. So I only basically manipulate in the 2D viewports. And to move the vertices, of course, you hold Control and click drag. So this is just a builder brush too. We haven't actually done any. We haven't created any BSP. To create BSP, you have two different types. You have a subtraction brush and addition brush. There's other types, but we won't go into that today. I'm going to go ahead and make a larger building. So first of all, I'm going to increase the grid size here, and I'm going to snap all of these to grid. Of course, there we go. And to snap them to grid, I first set a grid size that I want. I band select like that, and then I right click on the vertice that I have selected, and it will actually snap all of the ones that I have to the nearest grid. So now these are all snapped to grid, and it also snapped them in the vertical view as well. So it did actually change them vertically a little bit. But what we're going to do now is make them bigger. One of the things you can do if you don't know dimensions well is bring in some of these. There we go. Bring in some of these scale actors. Whoa, let's turn that off. And now you can see that this is actually a pretty significantly big building. It doesn't matter that BSP extends under the terrain. In fact, you want it to. So now we're going to go ahead and make this an addition brush. And when I click this, it's actually going to build the builder brush and sort of like do a mini build on the level. And you can see the default texture there. So now we're going to want to make a subtraction brush. And one of the things I like to do is after I make an addition brush, I duplicate it. So this is my new like working brush basically, and I can make it smaller. It doesn't need to be huge. It's just something I can quickly duplicate and rotate into position or move into position. So now we're going to create, I think this is going to be a 2-floor house. Let's see here. Yeah, I think we can manage a 2-floor house here. And so we're going to make 2 different floors here. We're going to make 16 thick walls. I think that's sufficient enough here. And we just need to get this in position here. Alright, let's see how that works. And so now we're going to subtract, and you can see it when you subtract, it screws up everything and you have to rebuild. Now there's a chance you crash here, and normally I would save, but I'm just going to rebuild real fast and hope that it doesn't crash, and it didn't. Alright, so you can see I got my first floor done. You can see that is the first floor. And then now I'm going to turn off the builder brush so I can select my subtraction brush, and I'm going to duplicate it and raise it up one. Now you can see I didn't get it perfect, the height of it, so I'm going to raise that now, selecting the addition brush, selecting the top vertices, dragging it up one, and hitting build. So now you can see now there's a problem, there's an opening, which I'll go over in just a second. So when you duplicate something, it actually moves it one grid size down and to the right, and so I didn't actually adjust for that, and now I have to build again. Now it's adjusted correctly. Alright, so I have the basic floors done, and now we need a door. And if you're if you don't have a good door dimension, you should probably learn a good door dimension. I can just kind of like wing it or go by my experience. I don't even need to look up a dimension or whatever. So I'm just gonna make a quick door. Sometimes even when I make a good looking size door and everything, I do still test it and make sure it actually works and that it is a good door. So here's this quick one. I'm gonna hit build, and there's a door. And let's go ahead and make. So now we're not gonna have the door go through and through like that. We're gonna have the door somewhere else in the building. Maybe have 3 doors actually. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna select this subtraction brush for the door frame. I'm going to duplicate it, and you can see how when I duplicated it, it moved it down into the right one. I'm just going to drag it over here, holding Control. Then I'm going to align it like that, and then I'm going to make sure this is toggled on. On is the lighter color, off is the darker color. You might have a color there. I can't see the color. In fact, I can't tell if this is on or off unless I click it once to see the difference. Very bizarre. Now once it's on, when you rotate a brush, it will snap to a degrees of like 15. So I'm going to hold Control and right click drag to the right, and it's going to rotate in increments. And I want to get it back to 90 degrees. And now I have a door over here. And I just hit build, bam, door. And so I'm going to do another door, I think over here. Do the same thing, and let's give it a little bit of a, there we go. So we got 3 ways in and out of the building now. We don't have any walls yet, but that's okay. So there's some things that you can consider when you're designing a house. For this, I made the floor one big giant subtraction brush, but you don't have to do that. You can actually make them several subtraction brushes per room, and you basically use the walls of the building, the main building, sort of the actual walls inside the house. For this case, though, I'm not going to build walls on the bottom floor. I will only do it on the top. Alright, so now we need to make an opening for our stairwell, if we're going to have a stairwell. And to do that, I select the subtraction brush. I have the top one here. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to drag it into position. Alright, so I don't really know the dimensions for a stairwell opening. This is just my best guess, and I'm making it possibly bigger than it needs to be, so I will definitely have enough room to definitely have enough room for it. So I can always make it smaller. It's easier to make it smaller than having to move stuff out of its way to make it bigger. And so there's an opening, and then upstairs I can show you 2 methods. We can add, like I said earlier, I made this little brush down here just so I can add stuff, and you can do walls like this. You make them, and you got to make sure the height and everything is aligned. You can see I'm working on 16 still. I haven't even changed, and I just build. Now I have a wall, so you can come up the stairs here, come around this way, and you have like a room there, sort of, and we can go into that more. You can see I have to change a lot between the vertex tool and the camera tool. It's just part of the limitation of the editor. It's very annoying. If I didn't have to do that, I would be much better off, and leveling would be much faster. but I have to. You have to click these. There's no shortcuts for these tools. The dumbest thing ever. Alright, so this is one method of creating walls inside a house. As you can see, it requires a lot of brushes. Brush there, brush there, brush there, brush there. You absolutely have to have those if you want it to look somewhat realistic. Texturing these can be a little more difficult and time consuming, but it's easy. I will go over texturing in another video for sure. Okay, so the other method, instead of making all these addition brushes, is you literally just use subtraction to make your room. So what was it, about right there? I think it was about right there, and then I will make it about right there. Okay, so there's one like stairwell room. I'll make another mini room here, and then we'll make another room. Actually, we'll have a hallway over this way. And then we'll have another room over here. As you see, I'm leaving gaps where I want walls, and where I don't want walls, I don't leave a gap. This may be a bit confusing at first. You'll have to play with it and learn like how it all works. And then you have to build, and as long as you've got a good working method, it will be much easier. Now, as you can see, we don't have any doors now, so that's one disadvantage. You do need another brush for each door, but in the large scheme of things, you actually don't require as many brushes. Now we're going to make the door, and we're just going to literally duplicate the one from downstairs and add it up here. Of course, we need to raise it up, and done. And then we're going to duplicate it, add one here, and then add one here. And then now we have doors to our rooms. And then windows are the same way. Windows, however, I do not have a good understanding of height and everything, so I literally will test my windows as I make them, or find another house in another level that has good windows or has a good reputation of having good windows, and use those dimensions for the height and whatnot. But for here, it's just a quick example of how to make the actual window, and it's quite simple, really. You just do the same as a door with some height there, and so you can come into this room, look out the windows, and done. So I've made a very basic floor plan for a house. After you have the basic floor plan done and everything carved out and good to go, everything aligned, and no BSP all awkward or anything like that, the next step would be to texture it. And then once you texture it, then you've got to fill in the details like window frames, the stairwell, that's important. Add in like furniture, rugs, the roof, the exterior, and so on and so forth. And eventually your house will look done. So that's basically the basics of working with BSP, addition and subtraction. And some things not to do would be to have things done like this. Don't do this. This works. This door, this still works. It will look the same in the world, but don't do that. There's no reason to not have it perfectly aligned. And what else not to do? So it's like it's hard to think of things not to do, and like it's all just ingrained to your workflow, and you don't even have to think about it. Don't have earlier I was saying don't have misalignments with your vertical misalignments. So here you can see that I've selected the bottom. And you can do this, I guess, but it looks bad in the game. If you're trying to like make it look all like smooth or whatever, it actually looks worse than just having it straight and then using statics to kind of give it some deco, some detail. So yeah, basically you want the BSP to be the simplest form possible. I mean, as simple as possible. And then if you have any ability to make statics or any statics to work with, you can use the statics to add in the detail. Like you could have the railings, the window frames, the window shutters, curtains. If we ever have curtains, that would be awesome. The rugs, the furniture, and everything. I'm trying to think what else. Paintings on the walls. See, on the out of the outside of the building, the exterior, you'd have the drain pipes, the roof awnings, or drain ditches, or whatever they call those things. The actual roof, of course, should probably be made out of static. There are buildings that have the roofs made out of BSP, and even the barn I made on Verville, that actually is a BSP roof. However, I designed it very specifically to allow for that. I actually used calculations. I calculated out the angles and everything to make sure it was fine. And I really want to texture this now. Like it's hard for me to leave it like this. And I really want to go over how to texture it, but I'm not going to for this video. I think that's about it. Let's see here. I went over vertex editing. I went over some standards with working with BSP, and I showed you how to make a quick layout of a house. The measuring tool I went over last video, so you can, or a few videos ago, so you could measure and make sure your dimensions are right for your doorways and windows. Or you could actually just go in game and test them, which is what I do. Of course, you'll need to be able to fly up here, and because you don't have a stairwell yet. But I think that's about it. Okay, one more thing. Let's say you want to like make it look like Cannon has blown up a fragment of the house. You have different shapes with the brush, so you can use this right here. Of course, we're going to